really rigorous research. It's been conducted at the engineering labs and
okay.
conducted under strict conditions. And it's really, I mean, it's a lot more rigorous than I think is necessary. I'm pretty loose about that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
But it's quite rigorous. And if you talk to scientists in this area, they really emphasize that they're actually, their standards are higher than some other standards. In the book, I mentioned some research on double-blind experiments, you know, which is basically the holy grail of scientific methodology. But you find that in the best of circumstances, people only use that 1 out of 10 experiments.
Yeah.
The noetic researchers use that almost all the time. So, you know, it's the standards of rigor and objectivity and empiricism are quite rigid in this area, which is a good thing, you know, because if they didn't do that, then they would be open to charges of, you know, soft data collection or whatever the charges would be.
Yeah, that's right. You also, you know, a few other, you know, examples are, of course, the one thing that you mentioned is the animals' abilities, for instance, to you know, sense and pick up on you know, incoming earthquakes, stuff like this. And I guess it was it Chinese or Japanese research team that actually, you know, dived into this and tried to figure out what was going on there?
Well, it was a British research fellow that I think did it, but it was Chinese officials who recognized the fact that animals could tell, and actually developed a successful earthquake prediction program that saved who knows how many lives. That one earthquake that I mentioned, and I know they've used it several times. I don't know if they're still using it today, but you know, it was highly successful. And there's other examples of that. I mean, people who have dogs. I used to have a dog that was really attached to us, and when my wife would be coming home from wherever she was coming home, he would know that she was coming home blocks before she got here. Like, there was no way, there was no physical correlation, there was no physical connection, there was nothing, you know. But that dog knew. You knew he knew because he got excited. He started pacing the door and waiting. Right?
Yeah.
He used to drive me up the wall. and people who have animals will know that animals do seem to have this extrasensory perception, right?
Yeah.
And so the noetic scientists, they look at that and they go, well, here again, something that doesn't fit into the materialist worldview. How do you explain that?
Yeah, exactly. And they don't, I guess. They just look away from it or trying to, you know, explain it away, or because this has been done with, was it Sheldrake that have done, you know, scientific, you know, he has followed the scientific principle in outlining these kinds of experiments?
Yeah, that's right. He's done quite a few research with dogs and homing pigeons, for example.
Yeah.
And I can't think of what else he's done in his books. But Rupert Sheldrake's actually an interesting case. He was literally excommunicated from the scientific community.
He was?
Started to publish this, yeah,
Oh,
years ago. And people actually, I think it was in Nature or Science, that somebody actually said that they should burn his books. So,
there you go.
You know, the fears the scientists have about excommunication and burnings and stuff like that, they're real fears because they do happen. But I mean, I don't think nowadays they can. I think the strength of the evidence is it's too strong.
Definitely.
And Rupert's actually becoming quite famous now as he kind of builds on that early research, and the world becomes more receptive to that kind of dialogue.
Definitely. Then we have the one thing that you brought up that I think was very interesting was the control experiments with little baby chicks. Tell us about that, you know, with the robot and all that.
Yeah, I forget the name of the French researcher who did that, but basically what they do is they take some newborn chicks and they split them off into two groups, and they print one with an image of a robot, just a robot that moves in a random pattern, and the others they don't imprint. And then they put the robot in a cage, and sometimes they put a candle on the robot, and then they put the chicks in the other cage, and they find that chicks that aren't imprinted don't seem to have any influence on the direction of the robots, but chicks that are imprinted and that have a connection presumably want that, you know, think of that thing as mom. They are able to draw it into their corner of the room, right? And again, you know, how, and then you know, there's tracings on the paper, and you know, it's clearly not random anymore. It's all bunched into this one corner, and you got to go, well, how the heck do you explain that? That doesn't fit into the materialist worldview either.
That's right. That's right. You know, so I mean, if we are to talk about, the consciousness, as it were, from a more Newtonian, then I guess, field of science, versus the noetic one, it seems to be like the main idea, I guess, of the entire piece here is that in the noetic science field, you, the observer, are a part of everything that you see, and you contribute your intent, your energy, your thoughts, and all of that is something that is is contributing to the experiment or to what's happening to you. And on the other side, you have like the awareness or the consciousness of a person is only something that actually pops up, how should I say this, after, or I should say like this, it relies on that the, consciousness relies that there have to be first a material world, and through evolution everything evolves up to the time when people have a brain, and it's the brain that develops the consciousness. But maybe you could, elaborate or tell us a little bit more about those kind of, the two sides, as it were.
Right. Well, most scientists, I think, would consider consciousness, I think they call it an epiphenomenon. It's something that, they look at the brain and go, well, isn't this complex, and this must be the seat of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
If you didn't have a brain, you wouldn't be able to think. And that emerges out of the Newtonian worldview, because everything, kind of has to have a source in the material world. And it seems to make sense. You poke at the brain, and you can elicit memories and movements and all these other, and if you damage the brain, you've damaged the personality.
Yeah.
But then there's the noetic scientists who are starting to question that, and they're starting to say, well, so one guy by the name of Bruce Lipton talks about consciousness existing at all levels of creation, and even you can even see consciousness and intelligence in single-cell organisms now who seem to be making decisions about the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
And other things like that.
Yeah.
And so they're starting to admit this idea that, well, maybe consciousness isn't necessarily located in the brain, or maybe it's not. They're not really sure. I mean, the theories in noetic sciences about this are still, I would think, as a mystic, they're still kind of stumbling to figure out what the heck is going on. And,
yeah.
And they're trying to kind of hang on to their material world by, the farthest they've gone is assuming consciousness is like another aspect of reality that they have to look at, like the material world, and that there's these two fundamental aspects, and they interact in some ways, and in ways that we don't really understand yet, but obviously they're there. The article that I wrote, of course, goes way beyond that, with this strong theory of consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah, you take things a little bit further, because I know that you speculate in you mentioned a few of the I guess the more, if we were to look at from the noetic literature, it mentions stuff like signal transfer theories, and what's the other one? Self-organizing or morphing fields, and this is one that has been put forth by Sheldrake, I think, to explain the kind of field theory for all of this. But you want to take it even further than that, right?
Yeah, well, and so the context of the article is my life as a mystic, right? And that 3 or 4 years ago, a bunch of stuff happened to me, and I became a mystic. I mean, if you asked me what my job was, I would say I'm a mystic.
Yeah.
I'm a scientist too. But in the tradition of mystics, like it's my job as a mystic to present the world, to the universe, cosmology and theology to people, and say this is the way it is. Take it or leave it. But in that context, as I go through the article, I'm saying, well, here's this anomaly, and well, I know why that is.
Yeah.
And I kind of have the theory for all these things, and so I present that theory in the middle section of the paper and say, well, this theory, as radical as it is, and as strange as it is, and as anathema it might be to a dogmatic materialist's ears, this it appears to explain all these phenomena. It doesn't leave some out, like signal transfer theory or morphic fields. It covers everything.
Yeah.
And although there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of elaborating and seeing how that works out in the different disciplines, it explains everything. So.
Yeah.
And then from there I go on and talk about what it explains and how it could be productive scientifically, and who knows what will happen from it.
Yeah, definitely. One thing, you had a quote. I'm going to read that here. I thought it was great. quite interesting is from John. John, I don't think I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but for and John, it's from 2002. It says. We do not really know how to define it, consciousness, how to characterize it, how to model it, or how to measure its properties. We do not understand its relationship with the physical world, including those with its own physiological mechanisms. And of course, further down you say that consciousness is the root of all things, and this is kind of, I guess, where the main theory begins, and this is also where it kind of dovetails with the Book of Light, I guess. But tell us about that. The consciousness as the root of all things. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that consciousness is the root of all things. Like everything, from the ideas in your head to the physical world around you, is a manifestation of consciousness. And I elaborate why that is in the Book of Light, but I also, in the article, start off from the beginning. And I think there's a point in the article where I kind of say, well, if you're religious, the beginning is the Big Bang, and if you're scientific, the religious is the the beginning is the Big Bang, and there you go. Science and religion, the two big dogmatic forces, both kind of agree that we all start at the same place. But then I say, well, no, that's just not the case. And in fact, there's something before that. What is before that? And theories, Big Bang theories, admit that there could have been something before that. They just say they don't know what it is. Jan or Jan or whatever his name is. And my colleagues too. I've talked to my colleagues about this cosmology and stuff, and a lot of them are of the opinion that you just can't understand this stuff. You're never going to be able to understand God or consciousness. It remains ineffable. You won't know how to make the connections with that. And I'm going, as somebody who's actually done all that stuff, oh, no, it's not that hard. And that gets us back to the article. But yeah, so we go before the Big Bang, and then we, in an attempt to understand that, and we see at that point that what existed before then was consciousness.
Yeah.
Consciousness. What kind of consciousness? Well, it starts off in the article right from the elemental level. Just consciousness is aware of itself.
Yeah, there you go. I kind of like that idea. There's nothing, and then there's the consciousness, and it's nothing but the consciousness to be aware of. That's very interesting, I think.
Yeah, and it's actually an attempt to make this as logical as possible, because then the unfolding of consciousness and the unfolding of creation emerges logically from that first point. It to me, I don't know what other people would think about this, but to me, it's the most logical presentation of the origin of everything ever. Because here you go, you say, well, here's awareness, there it is. It's only aware of itself. It's very basic. There's a single point, nothing else. And so from that point, whatever you say after that point has to make sense in the context of that original postulate or assumption or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not an unreasonable assumption, considering that, materialist scientists will say, well, the Big Bang just started from a little point of light, and everything kind of emerged from there. They don't know why that is, and they have really no proof that that's the original cause, and that's where we have to stay. So you kind of the article presents you with these two alternatives. There's the Big Bang, which starts off as a point, the material world starts off as a point, or there's consciousness, which starts off. And you make the choice then which one you want to stick with, the material world, you want to explore the consciousness one. And then if you do, then the article, My Mystical Big Toad, it kind of explores what would have happened after that. Well, first of all, it's only aware of itself, and so it's happy about that for a while. You would be. Right? Opening your eyes one day and recognizing that I am is probably a blissful event. It's full of excitement, and that kind of needs. But then it gets boring, and so after that, that consciousness starts to look around for something to do, and it does that. It finds something to do. It creates a dream, which it dreams, and then it gets bored of that, and it creates playmates, and it gets bored of that, and it creates more playmates, and that's about as far as I get in the article, and it's carried on in the Book of Light. The details are anyway.
Yeah.
Which I point people. I'm open. By the time they've read to a certain point in that, they'll be open to the lay language in the Book of Light to go see what's written there.
Yeah, we've talked about that. The aspect of boredom. I guess that if something is just there and aware of itself, as you say, and the aspect of boredom, or the reality of boredom, becomes a factor. The aspect of play, or no, I should say dream,